How did I pass the FANG interview with no CS degree and no coding bootcamp? The MAANG interview is this very difficult interview process, almost a rite of passage that all developers need to go to land a job at one of these big tech companies. Meta, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Oh my! Recently, someone reached out to me asking for help passing this interview. It's actually someone that I had previously rejected when I was working as an interviewer at FANG. And since I don't have much going on other than a full-time job, YouTube channel, and trying to level up our entire American democracy, I said sure. But as long as I'm sharing my experience with him, I thought I might as well share it with all of you as well. So if you're studying to pass these interviews and bring your career to the next level, this is my 4-step process of how I passed the interview and ended up getting multiple offers from FANG in a way that really did change my life. So we'll hit it right after the intro. Okay, before we dive in, 3 caveats. 1, this is not an intro to programming video. Before you even think about trying to pass the FANG interview, you should already be comfortable with programming. As mentioned, even though I've never taken a programming course, I had taught myself from YouTube and game development, and then worked for 2 years at a smaller software company before even starting trying to study for these interviews. Caveat 2, to keep things decoupled, this video is just talking about the programming interview. So I'm not talking about system design, soft skill interviews, or anything else. And finally, caveat 3, everyone is different. Obviously, I can only share what worked for me. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to work for you or align with your learning style. If you find some of these things that specifically don't work for you, or if you have other tips for the people watching who are trying to pass this interview, by all means, leave a comment. I'm sure everyone would appreciate it. So without further ado, step 1. So step 1 for me was to brush up on some core concepts that I probably would have learned with any formal education. You don't necessarily need these things if you're just copy pasting things from Stack Overflow, but to really understand what's going on. Specifically, these things gave me a solid foundation to build on. Number 1 is literally to watch this video from Tom Scott on the fetch execute cycle. There's no way I'm gonna make a better video than that, so just go watch it. It's really good, and it really helped me understand what the computer was doing under the hood. Then I've got a second video recommendation, also from Tom Scott. Maybe I'm biased towards people with that name, I don't know. And this one is about binary search, something I first heard of from the Da Vinci Code. And then the third thing was really understanding pointers and the difference from passing things by value and passing by reference. Unfortunately, I don't have a great video for this. This is something I picked up teaching myself Golang, which handles pointers explicitly in a way that C# or JavaScript did not. Obviously, in all language, you are using pointers and you're using references, but some languages do it much more explicitly than others. Now, you don't have to learn a whole programming language to pick up on pointers, so if anyone does have a great video on that, please leave it in the comments. Step 2 is to do some practice problems. LeetCode, HackerRank, there are lots of sites that give you the opportunity to practice the types of problems that you'll see in a FANG interview. Obviously, this is going to be a big part of the preparation. So how I approach this is, first I would start with some easy problems. One, to understand kind of the types of things that they were asking, and also to build up my confidence. So it doesn't hurt to just knock a few out of the park to get yourself on a roll. Then I tried to do 2 medium problems within a 45-minute time frame. And when you're doing these problems, be sure to be talking out loud about your thought process and what you're doing. Either talking to a rubber duck or a stuffed tiger, whatever it takes, but you want to get into the habit of talking through your thought process because that's what you're going to have to do in the actual interview. So again, I'm doing sets of 2 medium problems and trying to get them done within 45 minutes. Now, when I hit a problem that I cannot find the optimal solution for, or I can't do it in the appropriate time, that's when we move to step 3. Step 3 is to do deep dives into the specific data structures and algorithms that you seem to be missing. So if you're going through HackerRank and you find a problem that you cannot solve, and then you find out that the solution involved, for example, a hash map, maybe it's time to do a deep dive into a hash map. Maybe you don't understand this concept as well as you need to, or at the very least, it's not in your mental RAM, right? Maybe you have it in your hard drive, but it's not readily available to you when you're trying to solve these problems. And so what I did for these is actually learn how to implement these structures or algorithms myself. So in the case of a hash map or a dictionary, obviously in any language, it's easy just to create a new dictionary, right? But how does a dictionary work under the hood? So I would try to go about building these data structures. Now, you want to avoid, and this is for this whole process, avoid memorization at all costs, because you want to be engaging the problem solving part of your brain, both when you're working on these problems, when you're doing the deep dives. You want to be problem solving because that's going to result in deeper learning, right? You want to be mastering the basic building blocks and tools you need to solve problems you've never seen before, not to be relying on specific problems or patterns that you've memorized, because then what happens is if you get tripped up, it's all over, and that doesn't serve you. So avoiding memorization. When I'm doing this deep dive, you know what the interface of a map is, right? You know what it's supposed to do. You have methods to set values with a key, to retrieve values with a key, etc. So how would you implement that, right? Try to do it on your own without looking up any implementation. You're probably not going to get it right. That's fine. Still try. And then after you've tried and you're stuck, then go ahead and look at the implementation. But again, not to memorize and not to copy the implementation, but to find that thing that you were missing from your own implementation, right? Maybe you didn't realize that you needed to hash the keys that were coming in, right? To find where they go in an array. Whatever it was, find that, apply it to your own implementation, right? And building this out is going to help you really understand how these data structures work and make them readily available to you when you're working on these problems, right? Loading them up into your RAM. So now we're going through a bit of a cycle, right? We do a deep dive into hash maps. After we're done with that, go back to step 2, go back to HackerRank, LeetCode, whatever your preferred platform. Go back to your sets of trying to do these two problems. Maybe you encounter a different problem that you can't solve. Maybe this time it's recursion, maybe it's a priority queue. Again, do a deep dive. Implement that data structure yourself. Teach yourself to be able to do it on cue, to do a quick sort whenever you need to. That's going to help you learn these things, not in your mind, but in your soul, so that they're available to you when you're solving the problems. So we're doing problems, we're finding things we don't know, we're learning those things deeply, go back to the problems, right? And this is the back and forth cycle. Now, once we're able to complete 3 sets in a row, and again, a set is 2 medium problems within 45 minutes. If you really want to up the game, probably throw in a medium and a hard question instead. Once you're able to complete that, then we're moving on to step 4. Now, the first time that I did one of these interviews, I bombed it, and I bombed it so bad. I was sweating and nervous, and it was a terrible experience. Thankfully, it was not a real interview. I was doing a mock interview with Interviewing.io. This is basically a service that connects people to do practice interviews, and this was super important and helpful for my process. Even if you've gotten really good at completing the problems, talking to stuffed tigers, when there's another person there watching everything you do that you're talking to, it's a completely different experience. And you need to give yourself opportunity to practice something as close as possible to the actual interview. Now, luckily, back when I was doing this, Interviewing.io was just starting up and it was free. I know now it is a paid service. There are also similar services. I'll link a few in the description, but I don't have experience with them, so I can't specifically recommend any one over the other. It's going to sound redundant, but if you have one of these that you like, please leave a comment. But anyway, this process was crucial for me because imagine if I had bombed the actual FAANG interview, right? For most of these companies, they don't let you interview again for another year. So you want to make the most of these opportunities. So do yourself a favor, make sure you're going in and you're going to crush it. So step 4, formally, is the same as step 2, but with mock interviews. Get onto one of these services, find a friend who you know who's a programmer and help each other do practicing, whatever it takes. Do these mock interviews. And again, you're trying to get to 3 in a row that you can do successfully. If you make a mistake, if you fail one of these practice interviews, do another deep dive, right? What was it that threw you up? Make sure that you can implement that on the fly. What are the building blocks? Get really good at whatever those things are. You want to be able to do recursion as well as you can multiply, right? This just has to be like deep in you. So step 4, we're again going through the cycle. We do a practice interview. We find something we're failing. We do a deep dive. We go back to the practice interviews. And again, we're trying to get to the point where we can do 3 of these, 3 mock interviews in a row without failure. Also, you do want to space these out, right? You don't want to do 3 in a row on the same day. That just tests whether or not you were on fire on that particular day, which is great, but you want to be able to pass these consistently. So I would recommend spacing these out, do 1 a week maybe, and make sure that you're able to consistently hit success. And once you do that, you are home free, right? If you're able to week by week do a mock interview, nail it, right? You're probably ready to go for the real thing. I know I was. After that first mock interview, which I bombed, the rest of them I was able to pass, and then I went on to pass interviews at multiple FANG companies and choose between competing offers. Now, I should probably mention the timing of this video is not great. I know that most of FANG is on hiring freezes right now, but in the same way that at the height of the pandemic, when all the stocks were high and companies were hiring like crazy and people made the mistake of thinking that was going to last forever, don't make the same mistake thinking this current low point is going to last forever as well. The economy goes in cycles, and eventually FANG is going to be hiring again, and you wouldn't be ready to pass those interviews. So anyway, that is just my story. That's my approach. It worked for me. I hope it works for you as well. If you're going through that process yourself, as you're learning things, if you're finding methodologies of study or learning or things you think people really need to know about this process, leave a comment. If it helps just one other person, it's got to be worth it. Okay, I guess I can go ahead and bring this video to a close. This has been Scott++. If you are a programmer and you want to work with me to level up our democracy and save the world, get in touch or go to starvoting.org. Otherwise, roll the outro. I'll see you in the next video.